We now face a world which is rapidly becoming more challenging and complex.
Climate change, terrorism, cyber attacks, transnational crime, mis- and disinformation, and competition in our region, which up until recently we thought was protected by its remoteness. Because we Kiwis stand for a peaceful world for all people. It's what we owe our children, it's what we owe our grandchildren.
Minister, are you mentally preparing Kiwis for the possibility of a war in our region?
No one wants conflict. We want to live in a peaceful world, and like many of our partners, we will use whatever means we have, including diplomatic and through international fora, to prosecute the cause of peace. But while there are threats of conflict, we have to be prepared for that as well.
But you're making a pretty clear statement here that where our Defence Force isn't a search and rescue force, it's not a humanitarian force, you want it to be a combat-capable force that's going to deploy more often. I mean, what should New Zealanders read from that?
Our Defence Force has always been combat-capable. That's what a Defence Force is. But if, for example, conflict does break out in the South China Sea, where $20 billion worth of our exports flows through every year, we have a stake in that. And we may be called on to play a role should conflict break out. We need to be equipped for that and prepared for it.
How much of this is in an effort to get buy-in from Kiwis who would rather you spend money, billions of dollars on things like health, education, alleviating the cost of living pressures at the moment?
Primary duty of government is the safety and security of its people. That does mean we have to have a national security capability and a defence capability, ensure people's physical health is looked after as well.
But do you think that New Zealanders support you spending, increasing spending on defence, spending billions of dollars in this area when, they're really feeling a squeeze right now?
It is the duty of government and of the government of the day to have people who are thinking about those things. And whereas we haven't in the past been very good at talking publicly about it, I think the onus is on us to talk publicly about it. And we have to talk openly about what we need to do to preserve and protect our interests.
OK, Laura, well, one of the elephants in the room here is China, isn't it? That is one of the threats that the Minister is talking about or alluding to.
Absolutely, Rebecca, and we heard the Minister explicitly say that there's the potential for conflict in the South China Sea, which is incredibly strong. These policy documents name-check China a number of times in the movements of the Chinese government or what the Chinese government has been doing in the Pacific. But it's also more than China. It's about these emerging threats as well. It's about an increase in cyber attacks by benign actors, including state-sponsored actors. It's also about things like violent extremism, about terrorism, and of course that massive threat of climate change.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been a lot of sort of analysis already, I suppose, following the announcement yesterday. And Helen Clark was one of those people who popped up on Twitter, actually, to make her feelings known. She says, Laura, that New Zealand's abandoning its capacity to think for itself and instead is cutting and pasting from Five Eyes partners. That is not a ringing endorsement, is it?
Oh, no, it's scathing from Helen Clark there. And, people might remember that back in 2001, when she was in charge of all of this, she described our geopolitical environment as incredibly benign. And Andrew Little is saying the exact opposite of that. He's saying we no longer live in a benign world. So you can see a lot has changed there in 20 years. But really a lot of what Helen Clark is saying there is that we're stepping away from our proudly independent foreign policy. Now, the government, today's government, won't agree with that. Andrew Little says we're not really changing where we sit on our foreign policy. We're just being clearer about telling this story to the public. Of course, Helen Clark has different ideas. And part of this, as well as the discussion around AUKUS, something that we've discussed on the show a lot, while we might have ruled out joining the part of AUKUS that talks about nuclear submarines because of our proudly nuclear-free policy, we have still left the door open there to join AUKUS in some way, shape or form. And these policy documents, again, talk about partnering more closely with the US, with Australia, Australia with those other nations that are part of AUKUS. So Helen Clark is saying that really we shouldn't be looking to join AUKUS. That would undermine our independent foreign policy. Other defence and security experts have said that this is the biggest shift in foreign and defence policy in a generation. But I would also say that some of the people that we've spoken to who were part of this review say that putting China out of the equation, putting AUKUS out of the equation, we do still need to spend on our Defence Force. At the moment, they are not in a fit state to respond. We have horrible attrition numbers and things are looking pretty bleak there, so there will be money that needs to be spent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably something that everybody can agree on, but this is clearly, Laura, a conversation that we will keep having as a country. Thanks so much for your reporting.